Hi, everyone. It is great to be in an extra big lecture hall. Lots of students, fab. So to some extent, what I've taken so far from all these fabulous TEDx talks is the notion that TEDx is about making us see things in a new way. So along with some of you, I will now think about, when I see an Argyle sweater, I'll have to think about Monet, right? Or, you know, a castle in Scotland. I want to say that I feel like if at the end of this 13 minutes or so that I have, if I can get most of you to see your grandparents' den or television room in a different way, I've done my job. So I'm going to explain that. I'm going to get us from here to there. I hope you don't experience this talk as a little bit of a bait and switch. I'm going to talk about literature, I'm going to talk about delirium, and I'm going to talk about healthcare. There's some tripping in there, as you will see, but as I was listening to Corey Smith's talk in the drunken walk, I was thinking, oh my God, you know, what impression are we giving? But this is all it's very serious. The takeaway point I'm just going to tell you so you can mellow out. The takeaway point that I want to leave you with, 2 points. That literature provides a certain kind of intimate, experiential knowledge that is immensely helpful in the context of healthcare and healing. So that's my American literature, medical humanities personas coming together. The second thing, though, and this is pure, scholar trained in American literature, literature is itself, and the study of literature is mind and world expanding. So I hope I'll get us there by way of your grandparents' chair. As I talk, I'd like you to stare at this image. I'm going to talk about a 19th century writer named Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I hope quite a few of you have read Charlotte Perkins Gilman. She was a contemporary of William James, of Henry James, of Kate Chopin, of Mark Twain. So she's a 19th century American writer who was an activist, a reformer, a sociologist. She was one of those wonderful people of the progressive era in the United States who had the audacity to think, I can change the world, and I'll do it by giving speeches, and I will do it by traveling the country and talking to people, and I will publish important books of sociology. That said, I think today, undoubtedly, what she is remembered for, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, keep looking at the screen, what she's remembered for is a short story that she wrote called The Yellow Wallpaper. I teach it in my literature classes. It's taught in women and gender studies classes. And let me tell you, it was actually the women and gender studies scholars of the 1970s in this country who rediscovered this fabulous story. So I'm going to tell you what the story is, and then I'm going to move on. It's a very short story. You could pull it up and read it, and you'd be done by the end of my talk. It is told from the first person. The conceit of The Yellow Wallpaper is that it's told by, it's the journal of a woman. This woman has just given birth for the first time. She is recuperating. Her husband takes her to a house in the country, a rented house in the country to recuperate. She doesn't like the house. She doesn't really want to go. She writes about that in her journal. She doesn't like the room she's in. It's got bars on the windows. She doesn't like that. The furniture is heavy and solid. She doesn't like that. The bed is nailed to the floor. She doesn't like that. But the thing she really doesn't like the most is the wallpaper. She finds herself staring at it. She wants to go out. She wants to be transplanted into a different room. But no, this is a good, spacious room for someone who's ill, someone in a sick bed. So we get the sense that her family and her husband are saying, you're looking healthy, you're looking good, keep recuperating, lie in bed, don't occupy yourself, don't worry. more and more from the first-person account, we get a sense of how preoccupied this woman is with this wallpaper. And I hope you're getting a sense of what it might mean to be in a room where that's your wallpaper. So at one moment in the story, quite early on, she says in her journal, "It dwells so in my mind." And that's what I want us to think about today. This notion of our environment, of our wallpaper, of the room that we find ourselves in. What does it mean for it to dwell in our mind? There's also, of course, a play on words. The woman is in a dwelling, but rather than being properly the occupant, the room starts to occupy her, right? It's dwelling in her mind. So, with the yellow wallpaper in mind, let's think about tripping. I hope some of you are familiar with this video. So this is from a New York City videographer named Dean Peterson, who gave me permission to show his video, made this video of his subway station in New York City, 36th Street subway station. He had sent letters, he had alerted the transit authority that, there is one step in this subway station that is a fraction of an inch different from all the rest, a fraction of an inch. And look at the way it reverberates, right? As Dean Peterson says, everyone trips on the step. So, here's what I want us to think about. Tripping of that sort, maybe others, I don't know. Tripping of that sort is a reminder that our bodies are situated in a world, right? Our bodies and our minds are situated in the world. We tend to go through our day seamlessly, flowing along. And to some extent, I think a lot of the TED Talks are about this, right? We don't notice all the plastic cups piling up, for instance. But when we trip, when something gets in our way, it makes us conscious just for a moment. Usually makes us self-conscious for more than a moment, perhaps. But it's a coming to attention. So this kind of tripping, in which we lose our posture, we lose our balance, and then we come to attention, this kind of tripping is not dangerous, one hopes, but there's another kind of tripping that's wildly dangerous and really a healthcare problem today, and that is the tripping known as delirium. So what I want to do is say, first of all, brain scientists, philosophers of mind, cognitive scientists, neuroscientists, first of all, they situate our ability to balance and our timing it going upstairs in the cerebellum, which is one of the oldest, evolutionarily speaking, oldest parts of the brain. So you see that here. But what's really cool is that these scientists are telling us two fairly new things about the brain. One is that our minds are embodied. And we know that when we watch a fabulous tennis player or an amazing basketball player or anyone with sports, we know that to some extent their minds are in their limbs and in their musculoskeletal system. Here's the thing I really want to emphasize for today, though, and that is our minds are extended. It's not just that our minds are embodied, but they're extended into the world around us. Think about the way you can get up in the middle of the night. You need to go to the bathroom, you need a cup of water. You navigate all the clothes you left on the ground, and somehow you make it to the bathroom, to the kitchen, and back. You might not even remember that you did that. That's an example of the extended mind at work. This is a room, the kind of room that the woman in the yellow wallpaper may have found herself in. Okay? Think about what that might do in terms of your brain. Here's the cool thing. People in the 19th century were thinking this too. I have a quotation from a healer in the 19th century. He was part of a movement called the mental science movement. Here's the quotation. "The walls of our dwellings, the furniture they contain, the works of art that ornament them, and the beds in which we repose at night are charged and permanently impregnated with the material effluvia and psychical emanations of our persons and presence." Kind of gross in a way, but on the other hand, you kind of get the point as well. And he emphasis not just on the physical, the bits and pieces, but on the psychological. So back to the yellow wallpaper. When this young woman she's isolated, she has none of her normal things around, she is not seeing people, she's kept alone, there are bars on the windows, she doesn't have access to the outside, she doesn't have any occupation, get up in the morning and make breakfast and then go on your walk and read your book and then take a nap, and all of that falls away. She becomes obsessed with the wallpaper. During the 19th century, readers of this story thought two things about this story, okay? They thought, first of all, look at this image, right? They thought, oh my God, it's a haunted house story. It's a gothic horror story about, beings that haunt our houses. That's one thing. That was one response. The other response was this. It's a story about how dangerous it is to have tasteless decorations in a sick room. And here is the cool thing, and this is, English professor, medical humanities professor, I want to say to both those seemingly oppositional interpretations, I want to say, yes, you got it. The idea being something like this. Our environments haunt our minds, and in a sense, we haunt our environments. Put us in a strange environment. Add a few other things. No window, no clocks, no people we're familiar with, lots of other people we are not familiar with. Take away the normal apparatus and the props. You see where I'm going, I hope. So what I'm saying is, I think the Yellow Wallpaper is a medical morality tale that's useful to us today. It's clinically accurate. It's a portrayal of delirium from the patient's perspective. It's not about madness. It's not about insanity. It's not about dementia. To some extent, I don't even want to say it's a kind of allegory of patriarchy, which a lot of people read it as. I want to say it's telling us something about the relationship between our minds and our bodies and all of that in our environment. So why is it that we take the most vulnerable among us, people recovering from surgery, people who've just given birth, addicts who are going through withdrawal, people with a high fever, and put them in environments that we now know actually cause us to trip, cause delirium to happen. Again, delirium is not dementia. It fluctuates. You can be with it at one moment and not with it for another. I'll give you an example from my own life. When I was a child, I had a fever, high fever. And when I emerged from that fever, I still remember it, I walked out into the family room. My family was all sitting there. I was just thinking, how could they just sit there? And I came out of my sick room, essentially. You need to know that I liked ponies. And I said, I don't want to race anymore. I just read Black Beauty, too. So do you see what I mean? I think I thought I was a horse. I don't want to race anymore. Don't make me do it. And my family said, we're not making you race. But I was delirious. It was a very, sort of mild instance of delirium. Okay, who are our most vulnerable delirium patients today for hospital-based delirium? This is back to the notion of your grandparents' den. Daniel Dennett, who's a philosopher of mind, cognitive scientist, and researcher, he has this brilliant thing to say about elderly people in their home environments. It is commonly observed, but not commonly enough, that old folks removed from their homes to hospital settings are put at a tremendous disadvantage, even though their basic bodily needs are very well cared for. They often appear to be quite demented, to be utterly incapable of feeding, clothing, washing themselves, let alone engaging in anything of sort of more importance. Yet, often, if they're returned to their homes, they can manage quite well. How do they do this? Here's the explanation, Daniel Dennett. Over the years, they've loaded their home environments with ultra-familiar landmarks, triggers for habits, reminders of what to do, where to find the food, how to get dressed, and so forth. An old person can be a veritable virtuoso of self-help in such a hugely over-learned world, in spite of his or her brain's inability as one gets older to have big bouts of new learning. Ant trails, think of ant trails. So this is the distressing thing that he says. Taking them out of their homes is literally separating them from large elements of their minds. Think about being slipped LSD in your drink and you don't know it. horrifying. There are beautiful, I wish I had more time, there are beautiful, moving testimonials on the internet that you can find about people who have experienced hospital-based delirium, often post-surgery. It's the most frightening thing that you can imagine, to be sent to an alternate reality. So, we don't live in rooms like this anymore with wallpaper on the ceiling. I'm sure someone in here does, but in general, we look at that room and we say, chaotic, hectic, not perfect. So what about this room, right? If you think about the ways in which we house vulnerable people, they need those machines. I'm not anti visualizing technology and pharmaceutical, but we need to keep in mind the problem of delirium as we think about people recuperating from surgery. Here's the beautiful thing. This is happening, and it's happening by thinkers who bring together in a common thread people who think about design, people who think about architecture, nurses, families of patients themselves, people who read literature. All of these people, doctors and neuroscientists, they're coming together and they're saying, look at this nurses' station. It's a little chaotic. Someone could trip here. How do you really get what you need? And they're redesigning hospital spaces and clinical spaces to be more congenial to vulnerable people who are wildly susceptible to hospital-based delirium. We need to deal with this, and the reason is hospital-based delirium, often people are independent living. They go to the hospital, and they get the hip fixed. That's fine. But they can never go back again to live in their own space and in their own home because they have been misdiagnosed or undiagnosed with hospital-based delirium. Oh, she's too demented to go home. So it's important, it's shocking. So here's the punchline. After that videographer, Dean Peterson, took a video of all those people tripping, and after it went viral, and it had to circle the world before City Hall and Public Works took note, right? And then they did. They had the guys out there the next day. They were fixing the step. It didn't look like something from the outside, a fraction of an inch. From the inside, from the experience of people, and from the view of the videographer, that made all the difference. So, why did Charlotte Perkins Gilman, this woman committed to reforming gender relations in the world and the modern home? She wanted to have cooperative kitchens. She wanted to have communal housekeeping. I mean, she was cool and out there. Why did she turn to literature to make one of her most lasting contributions? Well, it might help us to think about who her great aunt was. I don't know if any of you recognize Harriet Beecher Stowe on your right. Abraham Lincoln, possibly apocryphally, but I like to quote it anyway, once greeted Harriet Beecher Stowe and said, aha, here's the little lady who started the big war. Harriet Beecher Stowe knew that literature can change things. It can make everybody trip in a good way. Preachers, protesters, and politicians had all for decades been trying to rid this country of the scourge of chattel slavery. It wasn't until after this book was published that it really happened, right? So here's the hidden question. A lot of you are students. What should you major in? What should you major in, right? Well, major in English. That's a good idea. Major in neuroscience. That's another fabulous idea. Maybe you should go to medical school. That's a really good idea. Or film school. Film school's good too, right? Maybe you could learn to pour concrete. I know a lot of UNC graduates who are really good at doing beautiful labor in the world, right? Whatever you want to do. And here's the thing. So what to do with an English major or a major in one of the STEM fields? Let's be like Gilman and Stowe. Let's just start with the basics. Let's make and remake the world in which we live.